so we can record this meeting. So let me get started and welcome everybody. I just see two people, but I heard, oh, there's another person who's participating. So I'm just going to get started and then some other people trickle in. And if not, they'll hear the recording, which is what some people do. So welcome to the December 2020 meeting of the Academy for Couples Therapists. Um, we are, as we've been doing in the first few months of the Academy, it appears that we tend to structure these meetings with questions about the modules, so we'll get to that. I want to leave 10 minutes at the end to ask you how we can make these meetings more interactive so you can feel like you're part of a community of supportive peers. I'll start with a couple of announcements. I first want to welcome the new people who subscribed in November. Those people who just subscribed are entering in module 3, but I believe that they got access. I hope they got access to module 1 too.
We did.
So good, thank you. Let's see what else. Oh, so I wanted to tell you, remind you what I heard, what I mentioned in one of my emails, that the Academy finally got approval to provide 18 CUs a year for Illinois professionals, including LCPC, LPC, LMFT, and LCSW and LSW, and psychologist. But I'll send instructions via email. I haven't gotten there yet because I just got them 2 days ago. This will include taking a very short quiz each month, like a 3 to 5 question quiz each month about the module. Paying $10 a month. So, you might have to pay $120 at the end of the year to get the CUs, but to get the certificate. And I have to figure out how to have you do that. So, and the Illinois Mental Health Counselors Association has been gracious enough to allow me to send you one quiz for the first 3 months. So that means that I'll just be sending you one quiz with 3 to 5 questions, and that will be it. And I have to figure out, for those who come in later, how to. I haven't figured this out yet. So in terms of how I'm going to count the 12 months. So stay tuned. I'll be sending some information about that. I tried to minimize the amount of emails I sent, so be patient with me. So you'll just get one email with all the comprehensive information that you need. And maybe I'll put it up on the Academy site too. So remember, you can turn the camera off too. You don't have to show yourself if you don't want to. You can just be present without turning your camera on. Another reminder, especially for the new subscribers, is that I am hoping you will read The Stages of Development of a Couples Therapist. The stages are in your email and also on the Academy resource site. And every lesson has a PDF, and in the PDF, there are implementation activities that you could ignore or you could try to do. It's up to you. But the implementation activities are not on the audio of the lesson. They're just on the last PDF. So if there's 2 or 3 sections in a lesson audio, the implementation activity will be at the end of the second or third section. So okay, I want to leave like I said, 10 minutes at the end. I wanted to start by telling you what I tried to re-listen to the session, and you know how vulnerable it makes you feel to share this with you. And when I listen to it, I think there's so many things I could have done differently. And I can share some of them with you. Um, and then I was more prescriptive than I tend to be. I mean, I'm kind of prescriptive in the beginning, but I was very prescriptive here. And if you have questions about why I did what I did, when I did it, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Um, and you will be hearing from them again. This is a couple in a lot of trouble. You'll be hearing from them again in module 5, actually. Well, you'll hear 2 sessions back to back. And I have to say, one of the questions I have for you is, when I do one session, they're generally 1 hour. When I do 2 sessions back to back, they're generally 90 minutes. I try to make them just 90 minutes instead of the 2 hours. And I know it's a lot to listen to, but sometimes, like in the module 5, I'm walking them through an apology exercise, and I just need you to hear the next one too. So, and for people who allow, the other thing is you have to remember, not everybody allows me to audio tape them, and not everybody gives me permission. So I'm sort of limited in the selection of sessions that I have. Okay, so we'll get right through to the questions. I'll be happy to take your questions.
Well, this is Robin, and I'm one of the new ones. And I wondered why we got session 1 and 3 and not 2. So is 2 somewhere in the ether?
That's a question. That's a good question. So let me try to answer it in a way that hopefully will make sense. So for example, in month 6, I will do another launch, and people will come in and will listen to starting at module 6. They will not get 2, 3, and 4, and 5, but they will get the first one.
Okay.
So, it's like if you start in month 6 for the 1 year, it will be another, it will be. So that's how I'm thinking about it. I may change my mind when I'm done with the 1 year content. But I'm thinking that people will come in at different times. I'm growing. The Academy is growing every time I do a launch. But because I'm working on content, it's very hard for me to manage the launches because they take up a lot of my time with marketing and advertising and things like that. So that's been my plan, that people can come in anytime and they will get to 2, 3, and 4, but if they stay for the year.
Okay.
And because they're not related, like you can listen to the sessions independently, but I wanted you to have access to the first one, in part as a bonus, but in part because that way you get right away a little bit of my idea of how to handle a high conflict couple. So, but if you want to hear 2, you might have to, stay on for the rest. Right. Well, the idea is that people will stay on for at least a year.
Got it. Okay.
Of course, you don't have to, but that's
my plan.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? I usually try to get the questions and then start answering them, but I felt like I needed to answer that one right away.
Okay.
Yeah, I have one.
Monica, yes.
So something that I noticed is when this couple, after they had been going through the dialogue for a little bit, at the one point that the husband, he asked, could he ask questions? And he was asking some good questions, but after a little bit, and it's been a few days since I listened to it, but after a little bit, his questions, they were slightly defended questions. Like there was a little bit of defensiveness and like in the way he was asking them. And you could tell that she was feeling that and not liking it as much. And so finally at whatever point it was time that they were going to shift and then he was going to share his feelings. And I think and you had been praising them because they were really engaging in this dialogue and doing a really nice job of staying with it. When you said, okay, can we move on, or yes, let's move on, she seemed kind of reticent. She was like, okay, like when I heard her, it sounded like she didn't really feel like she had picked up on the defensiveness, and she didn't really feel like he had done it well. And I wondered if you heard that, and if you did, like, how do you make the decision whether to let the dialogue keep going for the sake of having a win for them, or do you stop it to make sure that that person feels really satisfied? Like, how do you decide what to do in that moment?
Okay, great question. Thank you, Monica. Let me collect the questions first, just to I want to make sure I know what you are interested in hearing.
I have a question from the PDF. There's a part where you mentioned assessing for their ability to exit the bad story. And I want to know what to do when one or both partners are having difficulty exiting the bad story, where they keep going back to it every session, no matter what.
Good question. Thank you. What else? Questions about the lesson or the session?
Sarah, also in one of the PDFs, you talk about in the initial sessions conveying hope, which is totally great. But I wondered if, especially in these couples who have had problems for such a long time, if you also need to manage expectations about what couple therapy can accomplish for them, or are you worried that something like that would undermine that message of hope?
Yes, thank you. Good question. Anything else about the session? So.
Oh, also, sorry, Sarah, you mentioned that you had thought about things you might have done differently. I would love to hear your thinking.
Okay. Okay, so let's do that. And then I probably want to ask you your reactions to the session. And what you would have done differently. How about that?
Yeah.
So let me take the PDF's questions first. In terms of assessing the ability to exit the bad story, I think this is, I said assessing. I don't know that I mean treating, right? So, you're trying to figure out, what kind of work do you have? Like, what is this going to take? And so when you say when you say, Laura, that they don't stop the bad story, that tells me that it's going to be a tough one. That tells me that I'm going to have to do things, maybe maybe see them separately, maybe send them a document, how to get the most out of couples therapy, maybe. So I just wanted to say that I was saying we need to assess it just to see what we're dealing with. But on the other hand, this is language from narrative therapy. The ability to exit the bad story narrative is something that I'm using language from narrative therapy perspective. However, this is what probably every framework of couples therapy has in mind. How do you, some people call it a negativity bias, some people call it a bad story. So, but every framework attempts to get people Gottman says that people need to increase their positive interactions, not just decrease the negative ones. So every framework will have an intention of helping couples get there. How you get there is part of what you're getting trained in. It's part of what you're looking for frameworks to help you with that. My way of doing it in this session was to say, be very specific about what the dialogue tool is for, how to do it. And when I hear her blaming, I call her, and she agreed, and she was able to do it differently. And so I go back and, this is, as I keep saying, one of the hardest jobs in the world, because you don't want to make people feel bad about what they're doing. You got to confront them enough that they can tolerate the change that they're needing to make, but not make them feel so bad that you undermine their self-esteem and you trigger their defenses and their shame. So you kind of go back and forth with, moving forward and pushing forward, and then going back if things don't work or don't have the desired outcome. And you'll hear in module 5, actually, no, narrative therapy is in module 6. So in module 6, you'll hear a description of narrative therapy with questions that are designed to help people exit the bad story. So, and I might be able to tackle your question, Sharon, about what I could have done differently, maybe by getting to some of that. So I could have, for example, ask him, when she reported that he took the risk and initiated about a small issue, and I forgot what it was about, but I think she said, either she said or he said, he took the risk. I think he said, I took the risk and I did it. Even though it was hard, it was awkward, but I took the risk and I did it. So
I think
if we had, I'm sorry?
Sorry, I think it was something about cleaning the house.
Yeah, something about that. I mean, they couldn't talk about anything. It was awful. So he says I took the risk. So I decided not to do that, but I could have amplified that a lot more. I could have said, what does it mean? What does it say? What did you tell that's one thing I would have done. What did you tell yourself that allowed you to take the risk? And what does that say about you as a person? Or what does it say about your values? What does it say about who you are and how you want to show up in this relationship, that you were able to think this about yourself? So rather than getting the praise from me, I need to amplify his ability to praise himself. So right now I'm doing a lot of the praising because they are so demoralized and the hope is so little hope. And they've had like numerous terrible arguments, and they were about to get divorced until he, whatever. So I didn't do that, but that would be a way to begin to help them exit the bad story by having a conversation with him about his talents and his risk-taking behavior and what he's telling himself in front of her is one way of helping her exit the bad story for him. So one thing to remember is that we're having conversations that are witnessed. We have individual relationships with each one of the members of the couple. In addition to paying attention to the couple, we're having conversations with each of the members of the couple separately. At least that's how I like to work. And when we do that, there is a witness. So we're always having to take into consideration who's listening and what are they listening to. And so I think that one way of helping exit the bad story is to have the witness to hear a different version of the partner. Because her version of her partner is that he doesn't care, that he's defensive, that he's, she has a, bad story after bad story after bad story, and negativity bias. And so that's one thing I could have done differently to amplify, but I didn't do it. And I mean, I think this might go to, I'll see if there's anything else I can say about what I didn't do and why, what I could have done and why. But so I was just looping back. I was answering Laura's questions about exit the bad story. Laura, did I do enough for that? Do you have anything else?
No, that's helpful.
Okay. So I want to go to Sharon's question next about managing expectations about hope. And what I have, you didn't hear me. I think you did. I think I do say something about that in this session where I say to them both, you have a child, you need to figure out how to do this, whether you stay together or not. So I believe that not everything, but a good percentage of why couples are in trouble, and again, this is about my beliefs, is because they can't talk about their differences in a constructive way, which this session is a good example of how I help people navigate that. And so regardless of what I tell them, what couples who are on the brink of divorce, and we haven't talked yet in this group about that, but I would say about a third of the couples who seek couples therapy, if not more, nowadays come with either a mixed agenda where one wants out and one doesn't know, or one is in and one is out, or they come with ambivalence about the future of the relationship and with very little hope. So so I'm just saying a little more, a third or a little more are coming specifically saying, I don't know if we can stay together. The other 2/3 come with very low hope. So, but maybe they don't, maybe they threaten divorce, or maybe they think about it, but don't talk about it. But I mean, the divorce narrative is there in so many of the couples that we work with. And so because of my belief that couples get into a lot of trouble because they can't figure out how to talk about their differences and disagreements and disappointments, that if I can help them navigate a dialogue about those differences and disagreements and disappointments, regardless of the outcome, I consider that a good, I'm trying to not feel like my job is to keep them together, although that's not an easy thing to get out of, right? So it's not an easy thing not to want for them.
Yeah.
But when I can keep some distance about what I want from them rather than what they want for themselves, I do strongly believe that it doesn't matter, that they'll have, and sometimes I say that directly, you'll have a better separation, you'll have a better divorce if you can figure out how to talk differently, if you can have dialogues that are less contentious, if you can figure out how to negotiate and collaborate. Sometimes I say that people who are about to get divorced, ironically and paradoxically, need to learn to do things that if they had learned them before, they wouldn't be in this place in the first place. So it's a very interesting paradox, and I have done some successful, in fact, I'm doing that right now, at least with 3 or 4 of the couples in my caseload that I'm doing, that they are either separated or we're working on a separation agreement. So did I answer the question, Sharon, about how do I manage expectations about hope?
Oh, yes, I just wondered if there was an opposition there. It's not in the PDF things, but you're right, it is in the session, the audio of the session.
Okay, okay. So I want to go to now, well, before I go to Monica's question about how I decide what to do, I want to hear if you have any other questions stemming from what I was just talking about.
I don't know if this is a question or just something I'm thinking about with a client, a couple I'm working with now, but what you just said about managing hope is very interesting. And this idea of keeping distance personally keeping distance from my own expectations. This is a couple where there's a very strong imbalance between, so I was thinking of when you spoke about the financial imbalance, this was useful. My couple has an imbalance in their ability to express themselves emotionally. And the one who's very expressive slightly bullies the other. And so I'm trying to sort out how to manage my feeling of this is not a solvable problem. The dominant person would fit into a category of borderline if we were going to talk about diagnosing things, and I have some fear for the person who's not. And so I guess just thinking about how we manage our own responses in session, and also I guess I'm thinking about aiming over time to slowly bring that out kind of through the process you used of helping them to talk through the issues bit by bit, but I don't have a lot of hope for this becoming a better end, I guess, is mostly. So sort of sitting with that might be something.
So
to
how do you
talk about.
manage your own hopelessness?
Boy, I take a lot of deep breaths before and after and try and talk about it a lot. And I think one of your prompts in the things to do after about things I would want to do differently is I do feel like I am struggling with how to stand up to the person who's more dominant, because I see the ways in which she lashes out at her partner. And I don't want to evoke that in the session. And yet, so I find myself not maybe naming the things that I see her doing wrong in the what I would call the empathic understanding response, like when they're trying to understand each other and do the cycling. I find that my fault, I think, is I under respond to her errors in understanding the partner, because I know that she will generally beat the partner up. And so it's a complicated maybe question that I'm asking.
Yeah, it is, but it's fascinating. And I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because it deals with, I think you're dealing with a couple of different things, but I'm gonna focus on the under responding to the aggressor for fear of turning her off.
Yes, that's
and that's fascinating. It's a very, very interesting question. And without getting into too much detail of that counter transference, which could, if we were, let's say, in an individual consultation session, I might ask you, which I'm not going to do in this one, but I might ask you about your history of confronting a bully, about your history with a bully, either confronting or witnessing or victim as a victim. The Very Real says, were you a victim of the bully? Were you a witness of a bully, or were you, whatever the third one is, I can't remember right now. But I would be asking you questions about your experience with that, and then I would ask you I would ask you questions about what the fear is, right? So connected to, but I want to say in general, many of us became therapists to understand or overcome our own traumatic experiences, and became curious about figuring this out. Many of us have done that. And some of the things that many of us, and especially couples therapists, tend to be not very good at confronting the bully. So and we tend to, another thing that I'm just going to talk a little bit in general about what my experience is about confrontation, is that very often we're not comfortable with confrontation.
Mhm.
Either confrontation didn't go well when we were younger, or confrontation was dangerous, or so we don't often know how or want to, or are or have the or have created the habit. So there's a lot of issues with confrontation. So am I getting at something that is happening that?
Yes, I think what you're saying is true. Although I find them interesting because I'm generally a person who nails people in couples counseling, and I think what I'm relating it to is I have a lack of hope about their relationship, and I fear that I'm sort of have my own agenda of let this play out, and the partner who's being dominated will at some point stand up for herself, which she is not doing. She just takes it and takes on the complaints and takes on the descriptions of how she's wrong in the interaction and tries to repair. But I think what you're pointing to is great and helpful to just think through.
Yeah,
sort of, what am I responding?
Well, thank you for saying that, but I was going to say that when we have a loss of hope for the relationship, that comes from two parts. It comes from them and it comes from you. So I was talking a little bit about you before, not necessarily directly about you, but in general about the therapist. And now I'm going to talk a bit about the client. So some of this is about the client. And I think what I'm hearing is that there is a deliberate attempt on your part to let this play out, and that you're almost deciding not to. So you have a decision to make when you're confronted with this situation. You have to decide, are you going to confront the aggressor and the bully, or are you going to, and how do you do that without them leaving the treatment? Or are you going to have the victim, or the target? Let's call him the target. Let's call her the target. Are you going to get the target to move? Right. So those are the decisions. Are you going to talk? Are you going to get the aggressor to stop aggressing, or are you going to get the target to move? I think I'm hearing that part of what you're trying to do is get the target to move. And if you decide to do that, there are things you can do in the session to find out if she were to say what's in her mind. When is it a he that is a bully?
It's two women. Yeah, two women.
So when she what does she to have, can she talk freely? Can she feel safely to say what she's thinking?
That's helpful. I could support her better in that. She's not very good at the victim is not very good at expressing her emotions and tends to get flooded, and which is another good point that you made of maybe explaining to her the way in which she's flooded in the moment and helping her to slow down.
Right. So you might be able to help her. I'm working with a very aggressive, a very bully and aggressive male, with a target who has not been able to figure out how to move. And so, I mean, we're working on a separation agreement, for example, for her. And she's, she says, well, he comes in the house and starts either, he's texting me terrible accusations that I'm the reason whatever, thinks he's done all their marriage. And so they're working on a separation agreement to see, is he going to let her know beforehand that he's coming into the house and to see the children, or is he not? How's he going to do that? And so she's like, so he comes in, he barges in, he doesn't unannounce, he doesn't tell me that he's coming, and then he accusing. And what am I supposed to do? I said, have you ever considered leaving the house when he comes in? So again, I think the idea is that, or leaving the room, and again, I don't want to give her the solution before she buys into the idea that there's something she needs to do differently.
Mhm.
So very often the target thinks that the bully has to change.
Right.
Right,
And they have, I mean, it's a very, very common dynamic that the bully has to change. And in the case of my client, she believes that if she says this and repeats this long enough, he will.
Yeah.
And that she doesn't realize that there's something she needs to do differently. And so part of my job is to help her realize you can't control him, you can't change him. It's not your fault. It's a little bit like the Al-Anon thing.
Mhm.
You know, aggression and bullying is, if you think of it as a form of addiction,
Mhm.
and the target of the abuse and the victim is a little bit of a codependent, right? So they want the other one to change no matter what, and they think they can control it. And the reality is they have absolutely no control. So if you can get them to give up on this idea that their partner will change, and help her navigate a conversation about her feelings, and do that, but before you do that, make sure that it's okay for the bully to hear. And it's often not okay for the bully to hear target's expression
Yeah.
of. So I don't know if you can do it in an individual session, or if you can, I don't know if you can do it in a joint session, or if you need to do it in an individual session.
Yeah, that's helpful. That sounds like
The other thing I'm going to say, just to finish up on this issue, is that there is a very good book called The Verbally Abusive Relationship. And the verbally abusive relationship describes the different ways in which a partner can be verbally abusive. This is for the target to read, not for the abuser to read. The abusers don't like it. But the target might like it because it says, what are your options if you're with a verbally abusive person?
Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome. So back to and I'll go back to this case because I think it has implications that may be helpful for others in terms of what to do with the bully. So, but we'll
Can
see.
I make a comment before you move on?
Sure.
I just was so struck when I was listening to Carolyn. I was so struck by my reaction to the husband and wife in that first session. I had such a strong reaction to the wife's, what I experienced as bullying.
You're talking about the first session, the module one? Yeah.
Yeah, and my reaction surprised me. How much I wanted her to stop it. I was kind of fascinated by the intensity of my reaction to her. So it was just interesting. So I was really glad, Carolyn, that you asked that question.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, this is why this work is one of the hardest works we do, because we get triggered ourselves. I mean, the bullies trigger us, the victims trigger us. I mean, we get triggered in different ways. And how do we figure out what belongs to us in our history and what belongs to them? And very often, it may be that your reaction, Robin, is a reflection of how her husband feels.
Yes.
So the way you feel is how he feels when he's being bullied by her, which is a very interesting countertransference reaction, because we take on, we feel it in our bones what he may be feeling, and that if we can find some way of translating that, that's a great way of having a conversation about what's going on with you without revealing the depth of your feelings. But there's got to be some, in therapy, there's some way that we can share with them what's going on with us.
Yeah,
we can talk about that. So, okay, I want to go back to Monica's question about, I think, let me read my notes here. The husband asked good questions. He's slightly defendant. She was reticent to go to the next step. You're right about that. she picked up on his defensiveness. And then, but I wanted to have a win for them. And is that why I chose to ignore that? And how do you choose? Did I get the question right? How do you choose what to do? Maybe I should answer the questions when I get them instead of listing them, because then I forget what the question is. So I said, maybe I'll do that next time, especially if it's about the case. So I think that we are constantly making decisions. I mean, it's so confusing. There's so much going on. And on the one hand, I think we need to, it's a balance between knowing what we want to get out of today's session and being flexible enough to go wherever the session takes us if we can't go where we planned on going. So I don't know if this will be helpful, but I do a lot of preparation before a couple session. And again, for people who, like me, see 10 to 14 couples a week, maybe that's possible. For people who see 30 clients a week or 35 or 20 or 25, that may not be possible. So I don't know what your situation is, but I prepare myself for the sessions. What do I want? What's my intention? A little bit like before you start on a yoga class. What's my intention for them? What did we do? Where have we been? Where are we now? Where do we need to go? So this is always on my mind. Where does she need to go? Where does he need to go? If it's a same-sex couple, where does she one need to go? Where does she two need to go? Where does he one need to go? Where does he two need to go? So that's that preparation. I try to do that. I don't always succeed, but I try to do that. I feel like I lose my way when I don't do that. That I sort of go wherever they take me if I have not anchored myself to thinking about what they want, what I want for them. Of course, aligned with what they want for themselves and all the rest. But where do I think I need to take them? And so that really helps me. So in this session, I wanted them to have a positive experience with for the very beginning of a dialogue tool, which I had introduced. The reason they talked about it having taken a risk is because I introduced that in the second session. And so they tried to practice it without me, which was great. And I praised them for that. And then I tried to get them to do a minor issue, which looking back, it wasn't that minor of an issue, but I took it as well, because their other issues are so much bigger that believe me, this is a minor one for them, even though it may not have been a minor one about how do I feel ignored when you look at the phone and don't talk to me? And it's not a minor issue. Sometimes it's at the core of a relationship. But I wanted to get through it. And I wanted him to have the opportunity, because he was so much in his head and it was so hard for him to get in her head. And this was his first exposure to the process. I wanted him to, before the end of the hour, to get to initiate about what was happening to him, which was great when he did. So I have a decision-making process at all times. Like if I had stayed with what she said, that would not have happened. He wouldn't have been able to do the initiation that he did, which is why I decided. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yeah, that's helpful. And it's kind of, I think, what I assumed, but when I heard her, like I guess a little bit, I was like, I mean, feels harder to have to dig back in and talk about, well, you don't really sound like you are satisfied with that. But so I was sort of like, oh, I wonder if I would, like, I don't know. I was just sort of observing like the way that my
Yeah.
mind went. And then I was sort of relieved when you were like, yeah, let's move on. I was like, yeah, let's just move on.
But take a note of what you're thinking, make a note of what you're thinking in your file and go back to it in the following session.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
you don't have to ignore what you're thinking. So this is another way I make decisions. So I file the thought in my head, I make a note of it, and then I go back to it because this is telling me, and believe me, if it happened again, it's gonna happen. If it happened, it's gonna happen again. So don't worry about neglecting to do certain things because you choose to do something else. Because if it happens once, it's going to happen again. I wouldn't be, I mean, this is her style. This is their style. This is what's going to happen. She's going to feel dismissed. She's going to feel, all the things she feels. She's going to feel them again. And you're going to have an opportunity to bring that, to figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah. And I think that's helpful in general too, because I'm always aware of, especially if I record a session and listen to it, I'm always aware of the fact that there are multiple things happening all the time. And I'm always having this feeling when I'm listening, like, oh, I missed that, or I didn't hear that, but I couldn't have possibly responded to everything either. So it's actually kind of
You
nice.
have to make a choice. You're always making choices about what to pay attention to and what to ignore. I
Mhm.
think I was just working on editing session 6. As you can see, I'm a little bit ahead of you. And you'll hear, I don't want to say too much, but I think you'll hear her say, I don't feel safe. And I ignore it, and I'll tell you why. So yeah, you make decisions about this. That will be a good example of what I ignored and why.
Mhm. That's helpful. Thank you.
So I wonder if I could go back a little bit, not to talk about Carolyn's case, but just in general with ideas on dealing with a bully. One thing I could do is ask you how you deal with it, and then I can tell you a bit about what I do, or that would be one thing to do. So I'm going to give you a choice. Well, we could do that. Or I can ask you, actually, there might be time for both. I can ask you your general reactions to the lesson and to the session. Do you have a preference?
Bullies are always interesting to talk through, I suppose. I just, but I'm interested in both.
Well, let's talk about the bullies first, then. So what has been something that, do you have an experience of something that you've done that worked? And if that's putting too much pressure on you, we can forget it. I don't want to put pressure on you.
I mean, I think that it's probably one of the biggest reasons why I'm doing this, because of my reaction to bullies. And I don't get that many of them. I have a lot of clients, but I don't get that many bullies. And when I do, I'm aware of wishing they were gone when they're really concretized in the bullying behavior. So I think I'm here in large part to get myself out of the way so that I can work effectively with a real bully.
Okay. Thank you for saying that. Okay. Anybody else has either, I mean, I guess I could modify the question. You can say something like Robin said about what is it that's difficult about working with a bully, or if you have any things you've done that have been helpful to you. Either one.
I think sometimes when I feel like I've gotten through it, if I'm able to manage the thing I was saying earlier of just being irritated about what they're doing, so I have the same kind of personal thing to manage first, but is if I can say to the bully, the way in which you're behaving towards your partner is not following the goal that you've set out for the therapy. So kind of hooking back into, you're telling me you're here to increase closeness or improve your sex life or whatever they're trying to do. And yet you're dominating this person in this way. And so sort of, if I can comment on, I don't think that will serve the goal of making this person more inclined to be affectionate with you, for instance, or this, you can do this and the outcome you will get is X, but what's our goal here? And sometimes that kind of, I feel like it's a little bit away from their maybe shame about how they're behaving because they're so well defended against that shame, or they're so, protective of themselves that I don't get very far with that. But if I can stick with the logic, sometimes that has slowed somebody down a bit. And then sometimes some people just run over you anyway, but.
Yeah, I was taking notes as I was listening to you just to see what I get inspired to tell you about working with a bully. But I think that part of what you're saying is one of the things I was thinking to say is that you're trying to access how they're getting in their own way of getting what they say they want.
Yes.
Discrepancy between the lack of alignment between what they say they want and what they're doing to get it, which is a great way of talking about what's going on. So that's one. That's great. Anything else about your reactions to a bully or strategies that have been helpful to you? Okay. I'll say a few things about that, and then thank you, Robin, for the question, and we'll figure things out as we go along every month to try to help you with that. So I don't think one size fits all, as you're going to hear me say that all the time. So it depends. So one of the things I do, and you're seeing this in the PDF this month, that I talk about the different stages of the relationship. And I talk about the romantic stage, the bonding stage, after assessing for it, whether it was a good one or not. And if this is a couple that have been together, let's say for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but maybe not 40. So it just depends on, but let's say that they can access the bonding period and say, yes, it was wonderful. Let's say they can access when things started turning around. It was when we had the first child or the second child. It was when we started living together. I met with a couple yesterday for the first time where there's been some traveling. So he was working part-time in one state and then part-time in another state. And then things started to deteriorate when they started living full-time in the same state. So, so you gotta see if they can tell you when things started to turn. So it's at that point that you can begin to help them to see that this is part of my psychoeducation in the beginning of treatment, that when the differences begin to appear and they get plunged into the differentiation stage, they get anxious. Oh my God, he's disappointing me. Oh my God, she comes late every time I ask her to be on time. Oh my God, he is a messy, he leaves a mess, or, oh, when people begin to see the difference, they get anxious because it shatters their illusion that they are the same. It shatters their illusion that they are okay. It shatters their illusion that she will like everything about him, or that he will like everything about her. And that's very anxiety provoking. So plunging into the second stage of the relationship is anxiety provoking. The differences provoke anxiety. The disappointments provoke anxiety. This is developmental theory, and you're going to hear developmental theory, I believe, in module 4 coming up. I think, maybe not, maybe 5. I can't remember. So when people feel, if you can get them to identify to say yes to the anxiety, or they might say, oh, I never know, I wouldn't call it anxiety. Yeah, so, but how about, when you realize how messy he is, or when you realized how late she is, or when, well, uncomfortable, or so whatever word they use, because they might not, I think it's anxiety, but they may not always identify it as anxiety. You can say, well, people tend to have 1 or 2 solutions for that discomfort, that disappointment, anxiety. One solution is to try to bully their partner into being the way they thought they were, and to being like them. And the other one is to avoid the conflict, to ignore it. So people resort to 1 or 2 techniques to deal with the discomfort and anxiety of the difference, to deal with the de-pedestaling of being plunged into the differentiation stage. Another thing I explain and so then I ask them, which one are you? So if the bully, the bully will, might say, well, I try to convince her to think like me. I try to talk her into it. I try to, tell her that. So I don't know if this is the kind of bully you're talking about, but oftentimes that is enough just to understand the plunging into the differentiation stage from the after the bonding stage ends, because it inevitably ends. And I want to say one more thing about that, which is that what I show them is that it's not that they ignored the differences. Although sometimes that happens. They were there, but they ignore them, which makes for a bad choice of mate. But oftentimes the differences are in the background, because I actually wrote a blog about that. I think part of the reason we fall in love with the people we fall in love with is not only because of their characteristics. They're handsome, they're nice, they're kind, they have a good family. It's not because of the characteristics that we fall in love. A big part of falling in love is that we like their perception of us. So their mirroring of our perfection is what makes us fall in love. I love the way you think about me. I love the way you see me. I love the way you look at me. That's what we love, and that's what we fall in love with, the reflection that they do. Now, that's when we are on the pedestal. The de-pedestaling is not just that we de-pedestal them, is that they de-pedestal us. And what we cannot tolerate is the de-pedestaling of our partner. What? You don't like everything I do? You don't think I'm perfect? Well, I can't tolerate that. So this is the other anxiety, not being able to tolerate your partner's changes in perception of you. Now, a mature love is the ability to do that. A mature love is the ability to tolerate the anxiety produced by your partners not thinking you're perfect. And oftentimes this is very good for for more, so you can either, you have to gauge which of the arguments is better for them. Is it that in the differentiation stage, they get to the either bullying or conflict avoiding, or is it that they relate more to this idea that what they cannot tolerate is their partner's change in perception of them? Now that's not developmental theory. That's more psychodynamic, and and it is part of what we need to figure out. So so sometimes that's enough, and then you can begin to talk about, well, what do you want to do differently? How do you want to show up? What do you want to say? Another thing I want to say is that when the bully is bullying or being, and again, that means different things to different people. So I don't know exactly what cases you have in mind. Let me talk about, so Robin, you were saying the first one, right? So that's a very typical bully, right? She was very aggressive. She was very, so let me think about her as I'm formulating my thoughts right now. And maybe I do that in that first session, I don't remember anymore. But I want to talk about means and ends. I want to talk about, so I get them to a place where they can say, this is what I want, and this is how I'm going about getting it, and it's obviously not working. It's a process. It's not an easy one. Some people can tolerate that. If they can't tolerate, then you move on to working with the target, right? But if they can tolerate it, you can say, let's say, I don't know if I can think of her or somebody else more recently, because that's sort of fading now. Let me see if I have a bully in mind. I don't know if I'll be able to. Oh, I actually did that in the case consultation that we did with Monica this week in the Facebook group, I think. No, that was about trauma. No, forget it. Okay, so so what is it that, what is it? So if they can identify that their partner is disappointing them, that their partner is not giving them what they want, not meeting their needs, but I need this, but I need that. A lot of times it's a demand. So you can get to try to ask them, so when your partner doesn't meet your needs, when your partner doesn't do what you want, when your partner disappoints you, when your whatever it is, how do you feel? What happens to you? And then very often they can only access anger. I get frustrated, I get angry. And so one thing you want to try to do is get at the softer feeling that's underneath the anger. I mean, that's a standard EFT procedure. Like how do you, what, and you explain that, anger is a stand-in emotion. What's under the anger? Some of it can be disappointed. Some of it can be disappointment. It can be, so, and when you get frustrated, what do? So forget about the softer feelings for a second. Let's just go on to the next one, which is, what do you do when you get frustrated? How does your partner know that you're frustrated? How does your partner know that you're angry? If I had a camera, what would I see? What would I see you doing that would indicate to me that you're angry and frustrated with your partner? And so hopefully they'll be able to name it so that you don't have to name it. Hopefully they'll say, I yell, I get bent out of shape, I insult, I blame, and so then you go on to, so let's say, and then find a word. I think I did that in that first session. Find a word that will describe what you do if I had a camera and I could see you being angry, and I could see you being this frustrated, what would I see you doing? And then you say, well, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you hoping, not trying, because that's a little bit critical. What are you hoping to get when you become X? When you do this, what are you hoping? And when you ask the hope question, you get to what the narrative therapists call the means and the ends. So the end is that she's hoping to get her attention, that she's hoping to get her to come closer, that she's hoping that she feels abandoned and she's hoping she will come closer, or that she feels not listened to and she's hoping that she will be listened to. So whatever the end is, I'll be listened to, or she'll connect with me. Whatever she says is the end, meaning what are her ends? What are the means that she's using to get to those ends, and are they working for her? That's kind of the process in terms of allowing the question to become a question about means and ends rather than a question about what she's doing. Another thing, so that's just one possibility. If you think the intervention has to fit the person, and so I what you pick to do depends on the situation and the person and how all the couples have been together. And it may be that you have to do this in individual therapy. Another way, after you get to the means and the ends, is to, if you have a good alliance and you think that person can tolerate the question, that maybe you can move on to, this is what I was thinking, Monica, about the trauma work. Maybe you can move on to, so when you get frustrated, you do X, but what you're really trying to accomplish is Y. And is this idea of doing X to accomplish Y a familiar one to you?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that happening? Did you see that anywhere when you were growing up? Did you see, or in a prior relationship? I mean, sometimes the trauma is about a prior relationship. Sometimes the trauma is about peers in school. Sometimes the trauma is about growing up. So it's not always about growing up. And you oftentimes it's about a prior relationship nowadays. I was asking these questions to the member of a same-sex relationship, 2 women that I'm working with right now. And they've been together for a very short time, and they're coming to couples therapy, and I'm wondering why so early, like, what's happening? And it turns out that one of the women, her trauma is that her mother was always telling her, criticizing her, and she was always made to feel that she was doing something wrong. And so she never learned to problem solve and be in a mature relationship with somebody that, so right now she shuts down. And one of the reasons she shuts down is because she was, she's with a woman who will confront her if she shuts down. And she was in a relationship for 12 months with somebody with whom she never had any conflict. Mm-hmm. And so now when the woman that she's with confronts her and lo and behold doesn't think she's perfect, she can't tolerate it. So that's what I'm saying. It's not always about growing up, although sometimes it is, but it could be more about prior relationships. So I was saying that, then you can begin to ask questions about the trauma. What is this a familiar feeling? And seeing if they can do, if you can access that. But I want to stop there because there was one more thing I wanted to say before, if I don't know if I'm going to go back and talking more about the trauma, but I wanted to say one more thing about getting in your own way of getting what you want, which is what you were trying to say to her. And I have a few lines that I use in those cases when they can say yes to that. So if they can say yes to, yes, I'm getting in my own way of getting what I want, and or you say, well, this is what I say. If I think they're open to hearing that, the future will not look different than the past if you don't change the way that you're addressing your needs for connection or companionship or anything, whatever her needs are. And so I love that sentence. And I talk about the choice. You have a choice. The choice has risks. The risk is that if you change, she's not going to. The risk is that if you do something different, she's not going to do something different too, that she's not still going to meet your needs. So you have a choice, and the choice involves risks, and these are the risks. And then you try, I try to work with the ambivalence of choosing something different and the risk of choosing something different. And so some people, you can get into parts work there. There's a part of you that wants to do that, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But there's a part of you that doesn't want to do that because of the risks involved, or because you simply don't know how. Would you be willing to learn? Would you be interested in figuring out another way? So those are some lines I used, right? Getting it, just accessing the future will not look different than the past. You have a choice, and accessing the ambivalence about the change. And of course, there are times when I have to completely back off of all of it and say, I'm not asking you to change you don't have to do anything. Which is, I think, part of what you were getting at. You don't have to do anything. I'm not going to confront you with this. I don't know. This is just not going to work. So, okay. I was just giving you a little bit of an overview about dealing with a bully. I don't know if you have any questions or comments, or I don't think I got to the issue of what happens when you, the therapist, loses hope. I didn't get to that part. I didn't talk about that yet. And I don't know if we'll be able to do that today. Any questions or comments?
Well, I want to say that just the idea of getting out of my own way, all the things you just talked about are opportunities for me to get out of my own way. That my attention shifts from me, because I'm not going to get rid of my reactions.
Right.
But my attention goes to where it needs to be, and I'm really excited.
Oh,
this is hugely helpful.
Great. Oh, so glad to hear that. Actually, I'd love to hear some more about that, either about what was helpful to you in the lesson or the session, or what we talked about today, or any reactions to the session or the lesson.
Well, for me, it's your transparency.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you're taking us through what's actually going on for you. And that's very helpful for me.
Wow, thank you for saying that. I am asking this maybe in part because I need some reassurance that I'm doing a good job, but mainly because I'm always going to want that, but mainly because this is such a vulnerable thing that I'm doing. But mainly I want, this is a training experience for you. And so I'd love for you to verbalize that. What are your fears? And, in the first couple of months, I was saying that joining the academy is going to be great, but it's also going to make you feel bad because it's going to make you feel what you don't know and what you're not doing well. And so, you know, how do you balance the clinical self-esteem with the learning? And, you know, in fact, learning can only take place if your self-esteem is not in the dumps. Otherwise, you don't learn. So tell me some of the things you're learning, or some of the things you learned this month.
Mhm.
Anybody?
So something that's really helpful for me is I find myself in sessions I mean, I have such a sense of like this, there's so much in the balance for this couple and they're trusting me to, you know, help them through this. And it feels so important and so tender. And so when I am in the midst of the session and picking up on things, and this is a little bit like what we were talking about today, and I either miss something that I realized later, or I notice something, but I decide I have to make a decision quickly whether or not to address it. I always feel uncertain, like, did I do the right thing? Was that just me not wanting to have to deal with that? Or was that the right decision for them in the moment to help them get where they need to be? Do I even know where I'm trying to get? Like all of that. And so for me, not only is it helpful to hear you do a session and hear how you have a plan and they got through this dialogue, and that was really successful for them because it's a start at coming back together. But also to hear that it is a normal and important part of being a couples therapist, that there are lots of things happening and that you do have to make decisions and ignore things. And so that's just really helpful for me.
Yeah, there's a difficult balance between being too hung up on the outcome of what you want from them and not being too hung up on the outcome and what you want from them. So it's a tough balance.
Mhm.
Any other comments? Any other comments about, yeah, go ahead.
I really appreciate the way that you've structured this whole program as well. It's just been so helpful to have sort of particular issues to think about or aspects of it to think about. And I know that a lot of work goes into compiling all of your knowledge into that. So I've appreciated that being laid out. And then also just this format of, it feels like it's sort of a mix between consultation. I mean, I do appreciate that we're sharing more vulnerable, mistake-oriented things. And I think that's where I always feel like I learn more if I can say, oh my God, I did this terrible thing, you know? And so I appreciate your modeling that and letting us do that.
Oh, great. Thank you for saying that. That's really helpful. So okay, let me take one or two more comments and then I want to spend a little bit of time asking you something else. Anything else? Todd, do you want to say something? You're muted. I can't hear you. Nope, you're muted now. Nope.
No.
I'm not.
Yes. Now you are. Now you're good.
Telehealth may not be my thing. No, I've also just found it very helpful. I mean, and I also was thinking through, like you said, you're prescriptive in the session. Like, I think I tend to sometimes be more content than process at times. So I'll miss some things, or I won't, like you kept it going. But I found very interesting how you did that. I sometimes think I get stuck and kind of try to understand everything. It's helpful like, seeing you do that and having an agenda and a plan. So
yeah. That's a great comment. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go on with just a question about how to make these meetings. I want to make sure that in these meetings, and by the way, the office hours, 1 hour, I don't record them, and we might be able to get to some more specific questions about your own cases in those office hours. So I do that. I do these meetings twice a month. so I want, do you feel like this was interactive enough? And do you feel like you can be, that you're a part of a community of supportive peers? So I think you were trying, you were getting at that, Carolyn. Is there something, so I think I'm hearing that because I'm being vulnerable and I share that and I say what I could have done differently or what I did and my confusion and whatever, that makes it possible for you to also bring up what you feel maybe some mistakes or some struggles or and am I getting that? Is that okay? Is that how you want me to keep doing it? Is there something else that you would like to see happening in these meetings to make it even more of a feeling supportive and so I guess that's the first question.
Well, unless and until I hear something different from someone, I feel extremely safe. I feel very safe to just be myself, not necessarily word vomit, but to just tell the truth and see what I get back. So it's very refreshing for me.
Great, thank you. Sharon, you want to say something?
A whole bunch of thoughts just going through my head, but yeah, it's extremely helpful, Sarah, to hear you sort of analyze your own interactions with the clients and to hear that they're making decisions all along the way, and maybe some of those decisions weren't appropriate, or you could have done something differently. It sort of frees me up to think like, there is no right and wrong. It's sort of in the moment, feeling out what's happening and then bringing it back if you realize afterwards that something was said that you didn't pick up on. So I also feel like I'm really, it's made me aware how this particular audio session, I just love that in the session, you did a speaker, listener, initiator, listener technique, because I think it's because of my low self-esteem about being a couples therapist that I tend to assign it as, not always, but tend to assign it as homework and then have them come back and report to me. But it's so much more valuable to have them do it in this session because, of course, reporting about it afterwards doesn't capture all the nuances of that interaction. So I was picking up what Monica did, that you know, this guy was really defensive. Like he said, I'm going to ask a leading question. He was even very much aware how defensive he was. And I was thinking if I had assigned it as homework and they came back to me, I'm not sure that would have come out in the discussion. So it's really, it seems so critical to watch their interaction in session. But I think it takes nerve and guts to do that too.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Anyway.
What about okay, so would you say that this feels like a supportive peer community? That's all I want to know.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, totally.
That's great. And so let me just tell you what I worry about is that if we increase, like, you know, not right now, there's very few of you in these sessions and it feels very safe. If I open in February, I'm going to open it up again. I opened it up in November and very few joined. I knew that would happen, but in February, more people, I'm hoping more people will join. I don't know that I have a limit, but if there's 50 people on a call or 75 people on a call or 25 people on the call, how is that going to be? I haven't figured that out yet. I don't know what I'm going to do. If or when that happens, should I, you know, will I have to have more Zoom meetings a month? You know, maybe I'll do that. I don't know, but that's, again, this is the first year of the academy, so I'm testing different things, and that's part of what I'm struggling with, to figure out what's going to happen in February if more people come in. Okay, so, I think, I wanted to say one other thing about his defensiveness, which I want to tell you my reaction. So, or maybe I want to hear your reaction to what I did. I wasn't sure. So at the end, I realized that, what does he say at the end? He doesn't have hope. I mean, she feels like she had been listened to for the first time, and he starts saying, well, yeah, this is going to work if she stops kitchen sinking and if she stops, over and over again, right? So I felt like his shame had been activated. I felt like his defensiveness had been activated. So I think I did a good job at walking him through and praising him and making sure that he, made small progress and praises small progress and make sure that he, not to give him a very hard time if he was asking leading questions, but at the same time, making it okay for him to feel awkward and different and this is not natural and not easy. And then he says that at the end, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to say anything. I just said, I hear you. I hear you. You're not sure what's going to happen. I hear you. But I have to say I was a little discouraged, and this is why I don't know what's going to happen with them, because how discouraged he became after he had done something so different and so new that gave her so much hope.
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed I had the feeling as I was listening to the dialogue. I mean, I found myself, thinking, well, this guy's an asshole. Like the way he would kind of laugh a little bit at what he was saying or what she was saying, or I don't know, his defensiveness. But I picked up on your praise of him, and I was thinking, well, yeah, that is smart, because you want him to buy in and to see that, yes, this is a good thing, it's making a difference. But I wondered at the end, like if the shift in the dynamic was just enough that it made him uncomfortable, because of course it's comfortable the way it is, and so he was sort of like, wait a minute, I don't I don't know about this.
Yeah, so I was feeling a little disappointed too, and I don't know what's going. Well, you'll hear them in session 5, in module 5. You'll hear what happened there. We'll see what happens. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. I will see you next month or on the 16th, whenever we have the office hour. I think it's the 16th for module 3. Yep. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.